upon that as well. Maybe, we'll take some cues from there as well. What happened in 2011? How could Conservative win a majority government here in Canada in 2011? Fast forward that to, then we had Chrystia Freeland, Justin Trudeau arriving at the scene, and we still had Harper at the helm of affairs, very strong. The budget was almost surplus in a $2 trillion economy, whether you have $1 billion minus or surplus, doesn't matter. But still, and there was a time when Chrystia Freeland, she came into the scene, and there were so many others, and Sonia Sidhu, Ruby Sahota, Kamal Khera, and so many others started joining. You still had Navdeep Bains, Mark Holland, Omar Al-Gabra. They were all still around. They didn't go away. They were still there. I'll also mention Sukh Thaliwala as well, another. I've seen him for a good 25 years now in politics. But then in 2015, how did it flip? 2011, a strong majority for the Conservatives. 2015, a strong majority for the Liberals. Mm-hmm. In the last 25 years, I haven't seen any other majorities than these two. I mean, if Liberals, they were in minority during Paul Martin. Conservatives, 2004, 2006, 2008, minorities. The only one single majority that the Conservatives saw was 2011. Liberals, 2015, majority, but they were in minority during Paul Martin. And after that as well, 2019, 2021, again, minority governments. Are we going to see a majority government this time? We'll see how it goes. But it has been a while covering all these elections. And the good part is, we've seen all this happen right in front of our eyes, how things changed in Calgary, how things changed in British Columbia. There were many in British Columbia at that time. I would go 10, 20 years ago, they're not here. If I go to the Toronto ridings, Sam Bolte, Peggy Nash, Olivia Chow was an MP at one time. I went to her home as well. And I clearly remember when I went to Olivia Chow's home, Jack Layton was about to go for a run. Yeah, he was wearing his tracksuit, and we took a picture with Jack Layton as well. It was Olivia Chow's mother's home here in GTA, Toronto, and so many of those memories. We would go to Ottawa, cover so many things. So in the last 25 years, federal elections, I've seen many come and go. That definitely tells my age now as well.
And I would imagine that now in this year, or in these few years, the election, when it comes to the news cycle, it's probably a lot more faster in terms of news content, when you have social media, when you have coverage from all angles, whereas before, let's say 10 years ago, even 15 years ago, perhaps the parties would put out their statement for the day, they would have their Q&A, and that would be, when you watch the nightly news, that's what the leader put out for an election cycle. Now it's like around the clock, and it's like whoever spoke last, especially in the era of Donald Trump, it's a fast news cycle. How's that for you? You see the shift in terms of how much news you have to cover now, and analysis, and make sure you're able to break down all that's happening from all angles.
Yeah, great question. Of course, I think things have changed a lot. You're right, because of the social media as well. But our target demographic initially was the South Asian community. It still is. I mean, our target demographic still is the South Asian community. But what we've seen is, first things first. At that time, we had a lot of local newspapers as well. Mm. So, Torstar Media or Toronto Star Metroland, they had all these weeklies from Mississauga News to Brampton Guardian to Etobicoke Guardian, which would cover a lot of the stuff here happening, in the suburbs. But it's all over now. And we just have our very own Y Media's Midweek. That was our flagship product 25 years ago, and Midweek is still going strong. So first things first, we need to make sure, even if I can show you a few pictures of Midweek, this week's edition, you would see, Midweek now is right across GTA and is covering from Markham to Scarborough to Toronto to Vaughan to Brampton, Mississauga, Oakville, Caledon, Hamilton, Stony Creek, Kitchener. So there's a lot of coverage that you will find, a lot more coverage that you'll find in Midweek newspaper. So we need to make sure that yes, the gap, the vacuum that has been created with the local newspapers or ethnic newspapers, there's no free English newspaper in GTA now except midweek. This is the only one, and if you look at this coverage, so we're doing a lot of that coverage. Number one. Second is that yes, when you talk about or why media, many times I think this is the mistake that many political parties have made. Maybe my saying this could be a bit biased, but I want your opinion on this as well. I think sometimes the political parties, when they think about ethnic media or South Asian media, they think about pockets of Brampton, Mississauga, maybe Markham, Scarborough, Surrey, Calgary, Skyview area or Surrey area, that's about it. But they tend to forget, and if I look at, where South Asian, I would say 3,000, 5,000 vote, a minimum 3 to 5,000 South Asian vote or 8,000 South Asian vote is there. Out of the 343 ridings, I can easily pinpoint 100 plus ridings today. 100 plus ridings out of the 343 where the South Asian vote is a minimum 3,000, 5,000, 6,000, 8,000, 10,000 or in certain ridings even more. Around 30 to 40 ridings, whereas 10,000 more. Around, I would say, 2 dozen, around 25 ridings, it's all South Asian. The candidates, the voters on all parties. The South Asian vote is the deciding. But 100 plus riding, the South Asian community is active for a minimum of 3, 5 or 6,000. So this is the point which I would say many political parties are missing today. We as a media, we realize that. We clearly realize that. I can tell you from Oshawa, Bowmanville, Oshawa, Pickering, Ajax, Richmond Hill, Markham Stowell, Newmarket Aurora, King Vaughan, Etobicoke Center, Etobicoke Lakeshore, maybe not that much, then Etobicoke North, then you come to Brampton, 6 ridings, and 6 ridings in Mississauga, Oakville East, Shore, Oakville West as well, then you have Burlington, then Halton Hills, and then you go to Kitchener, Conestoga, Kitchener South, Kitchener Center, Cambridge, Guelph, Hamilton, Stony Creek. These are ridings. I'm just talking about GTA.
Yeah, there's also Scarborough. Yeah, border of York Region and all of that, yeah.
All of that. Scarborough as well. So I'm just talking about GTA here now, and then of course there, one of the maximum population is there in Toronto as well, the South Asian population. Then you quickly move on to those ridings in Vancouver, Surrey area, and then there are ridings in Calgary, Skyview, and so many other ridings in Calgary, then Edmonton. The interesting part is today the mayor for Edmonton and Calgary are both from South Asian origin. Edmonton, Amarjeet Sohi, he was there in federal politics as a minister, now he's the mayor there. And then same, you have a mayor, Jyoti, from South Asian origin in Calgary as well. So we realize, the point that I was making is we realize our responsibility that if we are serving our demographic in 100 plus ridings minimum, we have a huge responsibility not only in giving up to the minute news regarding elections, but also giving them a perspective. Every issue that is being announced, every policy that is being announced by any political party, so we give them a perspective of that policy. And not only we're providing them coverage in English, but we're also providing them coverage in Punjabi, Hindi, Urdu in their own language as well. I mean, for those who may not be relating that well with English language. So here it is in English for you, for all our audience who understand in English, but also in regional languages, Punjabi, Hindi, and Urdu. So we clearly realize our responsibility. So and the other part is that today what happens is, like just Donald Trump announced the tariffs. If I look at the Canadian media landscape, it was discussed from the US perspective, Canadian perspective, Europe, China, that's about it. India was slapped with tariffs as well. There was very minimal discussion about India in the Canadian media, and that's where we come. As much as we're discussing Canada, US, as much as we're discussing US, China, US, Europe, but we're also discussing the tariffs against India. I mean, the pharma sector won't be hit. Is the IT sector hit or not? Is their auto sector hit or not? What else is India exporting? India is one of the 5 largest economies at a global level today. And we are also discussing from the Canadian perspective. We're talking about diversifying our trade, which I'm sure we'll be talking. I want to stick to why media political sense if we're talking, but just I don't want to digress too much. But when we talk about Canada, we're looking for other options to diversify. But what are the other options available? Asia countries, the 10 Asia countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, and all those countries. I mean, how much of an economy are we looking there? What are we going to sell there? What are we going to buy from them? What sort of trade are we looking at that side? China, we're already facing challenges. Russia, Iran, we don't have good ties. Saudi Arabia, maybe we're trying to mend our ties in the Middle East. But then India also, are we going to really once again have good relationships with India and US? What are the challenges that we're facing? But I want to ask your perspective at this point regarding why media political Sensex. How have you seen the landscape change? You've been a candidate yourself, and you've seen how things happen behind the scenes when it gets really closer to the elections. Now we have not much time left right now, and every party is trying to get past the finishing line. You've been a candidate. How things operate and how things have changed from 2010, 15, 19 when you were a candidate, and now here we are, 2025.
Well, I mean, being on an election on a campaign level, there's so many different aspects of it, right? There's like from the aspect of a campaign worker, contributing whether as a volunteer or core person or as a candidate yourself. It's chaos, right? It's actually described as organized chaos because there's so many moving parts. So I can go from a micro level, as in such a campaign, and I'll go from a macro level. On a micro level, if you're the candidate, you're having to, make sure that you're doing the fine line of making sure if you're running for a party, whether it's provincial or federal, that you're going through what the party lines are, because the party has its own policies, so you can't make up policies as you go, even, if you'd like to when you're asked questions. If you're running somewhere here, like in Brampton, there's so much media access, right? So therefore, you're always asked so many different questions, and it's very important to know where the party stands on specific issues, what are they, and then of course be able to balance that with the local riding issues, right? So sometimes the party policy may take a stance that goes against what your constituents do, for example, the local economy or specific foreign policy, whatever the case is. So it's a very fine balancing act to do that, to be able to, because at the end of the day, as a candidate, you do realize that you're running for a party and the leader's message is important, but also you do realize that the people you work for ultimately are your constituents who are going to vote for you. And as a public servant, you are getting paid by the taxpayers. So really, your boss is your constituents, but then there's also managing where you sit in a party and in terms of being able to be a team player on the party side and what their message is and carry that forward, because the party's chosen you as the brand ambassador locally, right? So you're essentially, your job is to be that door-to-door salesperson where you're knocking on doors and you are parlaying that message that the party has chosen, not your own message, otherwise run for municipal politics, not for provincial or federal. So there's that understanding of that, right? And being able to balance all of that. And of course, it's important to be able to talk to media, because you're not going to get to what, yes, you're the door-to-door salesperson, you're knocking on doors, you're spreading the message of the party, you're introducing yourself, and you're identifying who's going to support you in an election or who's not, or who's undecided. But at the same time, the media is very important. You can't ignore them, because, you sit with the media and you get even 10 minutes coverage. How many now in this day and age, like right now, for example, sitting at Y Media, you're going to not only get on TV, you're going to get on the radio, you're going to get on the newspaper, you're going to get online at South Asian Daily, you're going to be available on the app, you're going to have more exposure, and you don't know who's going to, or on Facebook or on YouTube. So because there's so many different channels now in terms of outreach, you need to be able to also have that dialogue with the media, and also know that the media may ask you certain questions that you need to be comfortable in answering, and that's another thing too, right? Like, you have to be able to be articulate enough, because tomorrow if people vote for you, they want you to represent them in Parliament, in the House of Commons, and to be able to speak on their behalf. So there's all of that. And then there's, of course, the fundraising aspect. You need to have enough money to run an election campaign. And let's just say you even have enough money, you need to know how to spend it wisely, right? Because you do have an election cap during the writ period, which is now, and it's based on the amount you can spend based on the number of constituents. So on average, it's like, a little over $100,000. And so you have to be able to pay your office rent. You have to be able to pay for signs, which is usually the most expensive item to pay for lawn signs. And then, of course, you got to be able to pay for your ads, and you got to be able to feed people who are on your campaign, and you got to be able to pay for literature, pay for, Canada Post to be able to distribute it. So there's so many items, and then of course you want to have a good solid budget for just get out the vote, right? Your get out the vote is, advanced polls will happen, and an election day will happen, and you need to have a solid budget for making sure you have the right literature, and your literature is going to change, right? Because what's going to be at the start of the campaign is going to be different at the end, and to be able to mobilize. So not only is it about making sure you have the money, but also how do you use the money wisely, because you can't overspend. These are election laws. It's governed by Elections Canada. It is a criminal offense on how you get your donations and how you spend during the writ period. So you need to have a very good financial agent that's overseeing your election stuff. And so there's that. And then, of course, you need to be able to attract as many volunteers and campaign workers, right? So, for example, volunteers are great. They'll come, they'll give you, whatever time they have, but then you also have to be mindful of, you need to be able to acquire a set amount of people that are going to help during the election time, because if you're solely relying on volunteers come, you train them to what to say at the doors or how to answer the phones, but then when they leave, you're always training. So it makes sense to also have dedicated campaign staff that are going to be there to be able to, get trained, but also know, the messaging, whether it's picking up the phones, whether it's door knocking, all of that stuff. So this, that's just some of the stuff. And then, of course, there's things that come up on a riding level. There's things that come up, on what's made the national news and how do you answer it. And of course, it's always hard when there's a scandal of some sort, and then you need to know what your lines are. And so there's all that. And of course, you got to partake in debates. You got to partake in, any of those interviews. So it's a lot going on in just a few days and a few weeks.
One of the questions that I wanted to address today with you is, sometimes there's a dilemma, there's a confusion that a party is good. You like a party, the policies of a party, but then you may not like the candidate. On other times, you might like a candidate, but you may not like a party. So that is a question. I see most of the people, they're voting for party. That's what it is said, that yes, and this is what we've seen as well. In 2011, when there was a blue wave, the conservative wave, we had Navdeep Bains, John McCallum. We saw all these people losing their seats. Even Gurbaksh Malli lost his seats. But when there is a wave in 2011, we saw an orange wave in Quebec. Many of the candidates who never thought they will win in Quebec, they won their seats. In 2015, we had the red wave, the liberal wave in 2015, and then all the seats turned red. Many rookie candidates, they right away became member parliament. Few of them also went on to become the cabinet ministers as well. So mostly we've seen it's a party wave, it's the party which matters. Looks like people vote mostly for the party. But I want to suggest that yes, I think this is an area where we need a massive reform. As much as the party policies are very important, I would agree on that one, because at the end of the day, it's the party leadership or the top establishment will take the decisions, make the policies work. But then today's candidate becomes the cabinet minister tomorrow, and they could be the prime minister as well tomorrow. So out of the 443 ridings, I think candidate selection is also very important. We've seen some very average candidates becoming MPs simply because it was a party wave. How do we make sure that, yes, the candidate selection is very important?
Yeah, so statistically, a local candidate of a riding will contribute to about 5% of the vote. And the 95% relies heavily on the national campaign, specifically the leader. So a candidate alone can't win a riding on their own. It's statistically, it's just not the case. If it's a well-known candidate, meaning it's a person who's been in the public eye, a public figure, they could potentially contribute to about 9 to 10% of the vote in that riding. Again, 90% is up to the leader. So really, that's as much as you can do. So as a local candidate, your thing is to be able to pull out your 5%. Right, because that's what you can mobilize. The rest is really what's on the headlines, what is the leader doing in rallies, what is the news coverage, what are the policies, and that's really it, right? So on election day, when you see the numbers come in, you'll know what your contribution is.
How do you know that?
Because it's the 5% that you contribute,
that's
right?
all.
It's the rest is all leader.
So the 343 candidates. The leader is just one candidate and one leader.
Yeah.
But right now, if there are 343 ridings right now across Canada, so what we're talking over here is approximately 340 candidates. If I leave out 3 leaders or 4 leaders or 5, approximately 340 candidates. Their role is only 5%.
For the vote, yeah.
For the vote.
Yeah.
So I think this is something which needs to be reformed. We need to discuss that. Yeah.
Well, no, meaning statistically, as they knock on doors, are part of the community, do outreach in the community, they contribute only 5% of the vote. The rest is really the national message. It's really the leader. The leader determines if it's going more left, if it's going more right, if it's going more center based on their policies. The leader is the one who's carrying the message. The leader is the one who's doing daily announcements. The leader is the one who's doing the debates. Like really, the leader forms the way the party's going to go, and if they become prime minister, the way the country's going to go. So really, people are voting for the leader.
So in case you don't like a candidate, but you still like the leader, or you like the candidate and you don't like the leader, so what do?
If you like the candidate, if you don't like the leader, well, I think in this, you choose right now. This election cycle is about who's going to be able to negotiate with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Your local candidate is not going to negotiate with Donald Trump. It's not. They're not. Even if they're a cabinet minister, depending on the role that they get, they're still it's going to be top down in terms of what the prime minister wants them to, what's Canada's stance, right? For example, the foreign affairs minister isn't going to go rogue and say things that is not decided by cabinet and ultimately the prime minister's office. It's just not going to happen. So what you're looking at is who's going to be the person who's going to be there for 4 years, if it's a majority, who's going to be able to talk to President Trump, who's going to be able to negotiate with President Trump, who's going to have the interest of Canada at heart, and who's going to do well for Canada, aside from dealing with the U.S. and with its other allies, but also what is it going to do domestically when it comes to the Canadian economy and have a Canadian vision, the future. So yeah, so that's what I would say. If you don't like the local candidate, then that's okay. You're looking at Canada as a whole.
Okay, and at this point, you rightly said so. I think everyone is looking upon who will be better positioned to deal with Donald Trump. And let's try and address the question: why media political Sensex? Here at Why Media Political Sensex, every week, every day, Why Media Political Sensex keeps on changing. So, what is the Why Media Political Sensex saying today, right now? So stay tuned with Why Media or Why Media Political Sensex. We'll give you an update who is winning the elections right now, who is ahead right now. So as we talk today, we are here in the almost the second week is ending. So before we head towards the third week, so third week is starting, second week is ending. We still have time for the debates, but what is the current scenario right now? So now if we look at the national level, I'll just put out the numbers from Why Media Political Sensex. What do we see? And then I'll see what you have to say. Why don't we start with the British Columbia? I think British Columbia, I think last time when we saw British Columbia, we had a three-way race in British Columbia. 15 seats for the Liberals, 15 for the Conservatives, and 13 seats for the NDP. NDP won 25, but a vast majority of their seats was from this place. They won 13. So now we have 43 seats in British Columbia. Out of the 43 seats in British Columbia, I would say that yes, at this point, the way it looks like for me, I would still say 20 to 25 seats for the Liberals. That's where I want to position Liberals right now. Out of the 43 seats, 20 to 25 for the Liberals, 15 to 20 seats for the Conservatives, and NDP, I would say 0 to 3 seats for NDP. So they're losing approximately, I would say, 10 seats they're losing. So that the 10 seats that out of the 43 seats, the 10 seat of loss for NDP, I would say that could be the gain, approximately 8 to 10 seats could be the gain for the Liberals. Not much of a gain or loss for the Conservatives. They, I would say they could go plus or minus or 2 to 4 seats in BC. If they do really well in BC, maybe plus 4 or 5. So out of the 43 seats, 20 to 25 for the Liberals, 15 to 20 for Conservatives, 0 to 3 for NDP. This is what I'm seeing right now. And these numbers are right now as we speak. I'll tell you once again that yes, Y Media Political Sensex, that's why we've named it Y Media Political Sensex. Things will keep on changing as we move. For BC, even Jagmeet Singh's own seat could be in danger in British Columbia. Your thoughts on British Columbia?
Well, you know, what's going to be also interesting in BC is to see that the seats that the Conservatives lost in ridings where it had majority Chinese constituents, which has been really a demographic for the Conservative Party that's been very supportive. Since Jason Kenney's time when he was in federal politics, he did a lot of work in the GTA, but more specifically with the Chinese community to be able to support the Conservatives. We saw that lost in the last election cycle under Aaron O'Toole when he took a very hard stance against China, and then there was a lot of things that were going on, like just like how, you know, there's WhatsApp, there's WeChat that the Chinese community uses, and on there was a lot of you know, messaging on that if, you know, Conservatives come in, then there's going to be, you know, all kinds of things said about a list where the Chinese will be on. It was just a lot of things that were misleading. And so therefore the Chinese voter base stayed home and didn't come out the same way. So we saw all the ridings like, you know, Markham Unionville, that is, you know, 70% Chinese, where Conservative MP Bob Sawyer had won 2 terms, and even Alice Wong in British Columbia, they all lost their seats because of how the Conservatives lost the Chinese community. So, you know, there's, and I'm talking about it this way because, you know, there are ethnic groups that will support specific parties throughout election cycles until things change. And we saw that happen in the last election cycle when Aaron O'Toole was leader of the Conservative Party. So, yeah, Jagmeet Singh's not doing so well, right? Because we know that right now, because, you know, tariffs are top of mind. We know Donald Trump's a massive factor since he became president. You know, Canada, you had, you know, the deputy prime minister, finance leader, Chrystia Freeland resign, and then you had, you know, Justin Trudeau resign, and then you had Doug Ford go into an election a year and a half early, and now then you had a new leader, and now, you know, we're in a federal election, you know, that was supposed to be in October a lot earlier, and of course you're seeing all these shifts and all these changes and so what that means is top of mind is tariffs. What does it mean for the economy? Is there going to be a recession? We've already heard of thousands of Canadians that have lost their jobs. Stellantis plant has, you know, halted production for 2 weeks. We don't know what the roller coaster effect is going to be. Even people, if we're going to be in a recession, then it's going to affect people also not in the auto sector. So, you know, that comes on the back of inflation and affordability, and now you have all of this that's happened. So with that in mind, it's important to look at who are going to be the leaders that could form majority. It's either going to be Liberal or it's going to be Conservative. NDP has been doing worse every election since 2015, right? So they've just had less seats and less seats and less seats. Whereas, in prior to the 2015 election, they were the official opposition. So we know now Jagmeet Singh has seen those numbers, and that's why he's saying, if I become leader. He's no longer saying if I become prime minister, because it's just not there. Right, the Liberals have been doing better in the polls because they're taking the votes from the Bloc Quebec and the NDP. The Conservatives have stayed fairly solid with their base. And that's what we saw in the 2015 election, that the Conservatives still had their base, but it was Justin Trudeau that went from third-party status to majority because he brought out new voters, young voters, and then he took all the NDP votes because it was the coalition that happened when it comes to the voter base. So we're seeing that again, and same with Bloc. We know that Bloc Québécois is a regional party for Quebec, and therefore they're not going to form government. So that's why you could see Jagmeet saying...
We'll come to Bloc for a minute, but let's wrap up this thing. British Columbia. So if you look at BC right now, sort of the 43 seats, you're right. I totally agree with you. 13 seats they got there in British Columbia, but now what we're seeing is they're almost being decimated to 0 to 3. So not much of a room there for NDP to grow there. And I would say out of the 43 seats, good solid position for the Liberals. Quickly, let's move on to Alberta and Saskatchewan right now. We'll start with Alberta right now. 37 seats. They were at 34 earlier, but now it's 37 seats. There has been an increase in 5 seats altogether from 338. Now we are 343, but 3 additional seats just for Alberta itself. Alberta, this is an area out of the 37 seats, I would say Conservatives would still gain somewhere around 20, 25 to 30. They could still have, or maybe even 32. On a good day on an election from 32, maybe 34, 35. But I'll still keep them from 25 to 31, 32, around that range for the Conservatives in Alberta. Maybe another, 3 to 5 seats for the Liberals, maybe 1 or 2 seats for the NDP. That's what I think about Alberta for now out of the 37 seats. So not much of a room for Conservatives to increase their seats, or not much of a room for Liberals to increase their seats. I don't think so the tally would change. I mean, it can be this drastic that the Conservatives are at 20 and the Liberals win 10 seats. I doubt that's going to happen in Alberta. And I doubt NDP will pick up 5 or 8 seats. No, that's not going to happen here. So more or less, I think Alberta is locked. It'll be 2 seats here and there for any of the parties. Not much of a change. That's what I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Alberta's always been very secure for the Conservatives federally. Yeah. Of course, this is the province of oil and gas, and the Conservatives have been supportive of pipelines. And we, at the time where we hear now Leader Carney talk about that he won't repeal C-69, which the Conservatives refer to as the anti-pipeline legislation. So, this is something that we've always seen Alberta support Conservatives, and because more specifically under Justin Trudeau, pipelines were killed and there was job losses and Alberta went into a recession, so yeah, I don't think we're going to see much difference there for Albertans to pivot away from what they would traditionally vote, which would be Conservative. I think the Conservative Party is also very, and that's why you have all the MPs there, right, that have been Conservative for how many different elections. But I think Conservative Party, because it has Conservative MPs, is also very mindful of Alberta potentially going through a referendum when it comes to their province, and the oil and gas sector is very important to them. So Ottawa pays a lot more attention to that if it's a Conservative government, which is what's believed by the constituents.
Yeah, I won't take much time. Quickly touching upon Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan has 14 seats, almost a clean sweep by the Conservatives most of the time there out of all the 14 seats for Saskatchewan. But this time again, I don't think so much of a change. Maybe a couple of seats for Liberal. NDP, I don't think so they'll be able to open their account there. But once again, Saskatchewan, because of the oil and the things that you just mentioned for Alberta, not much of a change there we're going to see there. And quickly moving on to Quebec now. You're talking of Quebec. I think let's talk about Quebec. 78 seats in Quebec. I think Conservatives, 10 to 15 seats for Conservatives, that's where I see them right now. 40 to 50, this is the first time in my 25 years I'm giving, on the top side, 50 seats for Liberals. I could see that, that could happen, but maybe I would say 38, 35, 38, 40, 45, or maybe they could touch 50 as well. For the bloc, I think I don't think so more than 15, 20, a max could be 25 for them. Conservatives, 10, 12, 15. That's where I see Conservatives. NDP, 0 to 2 seats for them. This was the very province, the orange wave in 2011, as you were mentioning earlier, Jack Layton becoming the leader of the official opposition. This was the place where we saw Tom Mulcair. This was the place where orange wave, everything happening in Quebec for NDP. But I don't see anything happening for them here in Quebec. So not much of a change. The only best change from last elections I see is Bloc losing 8 to 10 seats to the Liberals. Other than that, I don't see. And historically, Quebec, I've never seen, if Conservatives win even 25 out of the 78 seats, I won't see any other province. Then that's Christmas for Conservatives. If at all they win 25 or 30 seats, there's no way they're going to win 25 or 30 seats here. The max, I would say 17, 18, even 20 would be a big thing for them. So 10 to 15 seats for the Conservatives, 35, 40, 50 range for the Liberals, and 15, 20, 25 for, that's where the bloc right now, and 0 to 3 seats for the NDP.
Yeah, the bloc is right now, they're scared because Quebecers are seeing that the Bloc Québécois is not going to be the leading party of Canada and go into negotiations for CUSMA with Donald Trump and tariffs and counter tariffs and everything else. It's really between the Conservatives and the Liberals, and that's where the Liberals are getting their numbers from right now. Under Mark Carney. Now, that's the other important thing, because we know that elections are won in Ontario. It has the most number of seats, and that, to be able to win an election. We've seen elections won without having Quebec. So, even in a minority situation where Trudeau won in the last two elections in minority, and we saw the Bloc numbers go up, he was minority because he had seats in Ontario. So we know Ontario is very important, but the Quebec vote that's the other thing, and that's why the leader of Bloc Québécois is saying, if you need to have me there to make sure that I bring Quebec's interest. But when you look at the Liberals' numbers go so high in that province, and then when you look at who's their foreign affairs minister, who's their finance minister, and all of it, they all come from Quebec. So it's a hard argument for the Bloc to say that, Quebec will be forgotten if the Liberals win, because you have, a big chunk of that cabinet coming from Quebec.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And since you're mentioning Ontario, before we go into Ontario, quickly I want to talk about Atlantic Canada as well. Nova Scotia, Newfoundland and Labrador, Prince Edward Island. In the Atlantic Canada, I would say, yes, Liberals did, fall behind for some time, but I think they've come back strongly now. So in Atlantic Canada, all these provinces, from Newfoundland, Labrador to Prince Edward Island to New Brunswick, I would say again the Liberal Party is strong. So they will win majority of the seats here in all these 3 provinces. If you could quickly flip through Newfoundland, Labrador, you're already showing. Then New Brunswick, if you could show that as well, and Nova Scotia as well. These seats are important. All these seats, 7 from Newfoundland and Labrador, are important. If we look at the other provinces as well, Atlantic Canada is important, but I would say now Liberals are back in action here. They did well in the previous elections as well. From 2015, they've been doing well, but the numbers were very different for a good 2 to 3 years. From 2022, 23, 24, but then I think Liberals are back in action over here as well in Atlantic Canada as well. I quickly want to move on to Ontario now, and as far as Ontario is concerned, yes, this is the place I would say make or break for every single party, and including the 2 frontrunners. It's a 2-way race now. We all agree on this one. So out of the 122 seats, This is where everything will be make or break for any I would say party here. So currently I would say Liberal Party 60, 70, 80 or even 85. I mean 60 to 85, 60 to 80. I would give or take 60 to 80 seats. I would say for the Liberals right now, and Conservatives I would say 30 to 45. That's where their position 30 to 45 right now. Yeah.
Yeah, Ontario is very important because it's the most populous province in Canada. And okay, so here's the interesting thing when it comes to Ontario, is that you have the premier, a very popular premier, Doug Ford, who is getting along with Liberal leader Mark Carney, right? So as soon as we all remember the image of them having breakfast, Mark Carney and Premier Ford at Perkins. So there's that, and recently, Premier Ford's talked about how, when the days where leader Mark Carney has to become prime minister when it comes to tariffs, say, the prime minister's doing very well. So, you have that, which is, high on top of mind of why is it that the premier of Ontario, a conservative premier, not necessarily having a relationship or supporting the conservative federal leader, Pierre Poilievre. So that's really raised some, concern there. And so when it comes to Ontario, this is key battleground. We know that under Stephen Harper, when he won the majority back in 2011, it was all the 905s, right? Did really well in York Region. And we saw that lost in the subsequent elections where the York Region has gone Liberal, and even seats that I was saying with the Chinese community and some of Markham seats lost to the Liberals that were carried by the Conservatives for a couple of elections or so. So this is also a very key battleground of what does it mean? That's why we're seeing Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, do a lot of events in Ontario. But traditionally, and that's why we also see Jagmeet Singh come along to Ontario, because there are those seats in the downtown core that are NDP, whether on a provincial or a federal level, and he needs to be able to secure those as well. So it's very critical to be able to watch what's going to happen in Ontario. And of course, we know that some of the candidates that were no longer candidates that were removed from either side, whether it's Liberal or Conservative, came from some of those ridings in Ontario. So that's a very quick turnaround time to be able to get candidates in some of those seats before there's the Election Canada deadline. So what that means is, as a local candidate, you have to register to be on the ballot with Elections Canada, and there's a deadline. And if that deadline's missed and you're not on the ballot, yeah, so there you go. So if if you're not the candidate on the to put your documents in with Elections Canada, then you're not going to be on the ballot and you can't get the vote. So there's that quick turnaround time because the Conservatives lost 4 candidates. I think the Liberals are at 3. Yeah. There's a change, but I guess after Monday that's not going to be a situation.
Yeah. So since you're mentioning Ontario, and I want to talk here at Y Media Political Sensex, where do we stand in GTA? Because I think this is the place in Ontario, out of the 122 seats, if at all things would change, if at all the Conservative have to form the government, this is the place they need to work very hard. Why I'm saying this is the place? Mm-hmm. Because in Quebec, they can do whatever. The maximum change would be 5 seats. That's it. There's no way they're going to get 25 seats. And for Liberals, that's the start. 25 or 30 seats is a start for Liberal. This is the maximum Conservative can go. Even in 2011, they won only 5 seats when Conservatives won a majority. So I have not seen them winning 20 seats there in Quebec. So there is no way anything much can be done. So talking about British Columbia, not much of a change there. It's a two-way race, maybe 5-10 seats here and there. Saskatchewan, out of the 14, they're already going to do almost a clean sweep. Alberta, out of the 37 seats in Alberta, they're already going to be 30, close to 30, so not much of a room to grow there. Atlantic Canada, maybe 5-10 seats, they do a lot, 5-10 seats there. So where is it that they need to focus? Ontario. So let's talk about Ontario. So Ontario also, I want to talk about GTA in particular, then I'll talk about Ontario. GTA, why don't we start from the eastern side? If we go GTA, Bowmanville, Oshawa area. Bowmanville, Oshawa, I would say they're strong there right now as we speak. Oshawa, again, they're strong. Then Ajax, Pickering, both these seats, I would say, Pickering, Brooklyn, and Ajax seat, I would say Liberals are strong as we speak on those two seats. Then we keep moving Whitby. Then we keep moving towards I would say Markham, Stowell. I still see Liberals strong in that area. You keep moving Scarborough. I would still say most of the Scarborough seats, Scarborough, Guildwood, Scarborough River, most of the Scarborough seats, I still believe that Liberals are still strong there. You have to come all the way till, for the next strong seat for the Conservatives, till Thornhill. Thornhill is one seat, Liberal, Conservative safe seat, that's the seat I still see. Go a little bit north, Kinguan, that is one seat, I would say a good fight between the Conservatives and the Liberals. Kinguan, that's where I see. You move to Vaughan, Woodbridge, again I would say Liberals are a bit strong over there. Richmond Hill, they have 2 seats now, Richmond Hill South. Richmond Hill South, I will still say Liberals are going to be strong there. And if you go on Richmond Hill, Aurora, Oak Ridges, I'd still say, Conservatives maybe have an outside chance, but still Liberals are doing well as we speak. This is why media political census we're talking about today. Quickly moving on from Vaughan, Markham, we've spoken about Scarborough, Oshawa, all these seats now from Vaughan. The next one, Durham, York Durham, again a Conservative seats, I would say. Conservatives are strong in Durham. If you're going to go to Newmarket area, yes, Liberals are still strong over there. Coming back on to Caledon, I would say again, we've seen Conservatives doing well there. The 6 seats in Brampton, I would say right now as we speak, the Liberals are still strong there in the 6 seats. Etobicoke, I would say Etobicoke North, Liberals are still strong. Etobicoke Centre, I would still say Liberals are strong. Etobicoke Lakeshore as well, Liberals are doing fine. Out of the 6 seats in Mississauga, Malton, Mississauga, Erin Mills, Mississauga, East Coxwell, Mississauga Centre. The only seat, Mississauga Lakeshore maybe, from the Charles Sousa seat. That is one seat. The Conservatives are trying hard, but I don't know whether they'll be able to flip that or not. And then you move to Oakville East. This is now the new riding now. Anita Anand is now from Oakville East now. Then you have Oakville West as well. Ron Schinzer is there from there. And then you move all the way up to Milton. Even Paramgil's seat is in play right now. It's not going to be a cakewalk for Paramgil. There was a time when we thought Milton, it's now Paramgil's backyard. It's going to be easy. It's still going to be challenging for him as well. You keep moving towards Hamilton. In that area, I would say Hamilton Centre is one seat, NDP could pick. But then you have Stony Creek. Once again, I would say Stony Creek, you still have strong Liberal hold there. Move to Kitchener Centre, maybe Greens are again the leader there. I think Kitchener Centre, maybe Greens would pick up that seat. Kitchener Centre once again. This time Kitchener, Conestoga, again I would say Liberals are doing good there. Cambridge, they're good. Guelph, they're good. But then there are now that area towards the north or that side, yes, or towards the west, north, that side, yes. The Conservatives will start picking up seats on that side. St. Catharines is again, I would say, a bit of that area for Liberals, but then on that, most of that side, Niagara Falls and all those areas, Conservatives are doing very well as we speak this area. So this is all the sum up for most of the Ontario and GTA.
Yeah, and you have to ask yourself why in an election period where a lot of the Liberal MPs were not going to seek re-election and the leader and the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was so unpopular, and they thought, you know what, we can't go into a 4th election and win, and you see this turnaround in a matter of just like weeks, months from the beginning of the year. Why is that? Again, it comes down to the leader. The leader represents 95% of how the electoral feels. So as we're talking about poll numbers, what is the poll numbers? It's just really the consensus on how the voters feel. And what we've seen is, everything that's happened with President Trump from his inauguration day about talking about tariffs and all those measures that he's been talking about, whether it's the auto sector and other industries. We saw even Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's numbers pick up because he took it on head on when he announced the counter tariffs, and then when he called President Trump. And then we've seen now, leader Mark Carney for the Liberals. The week that he was Prime Minister, there's images of him with King Charles. There is, the conference that he had with, Prime Minister in the UK, with the President in France, and then the day where the tariffs were going to be announced on the auto sector, you had Leader Carney talk about $2 billion investment for the auto sector the same day. So it seems like, those numbers are picking back up, where if you were to say 12 weeks ago, how are the Liberals doing in the seats, everybody guessed, because for 2 years, the Conservatives were up 27 points ahead of the Liberals, and so everybody assumed this was going to be a clean sweep for the Conservatives. So every riding that you just named was, it was projected to be Conservative, and so in this era of the Trump era, as we can call it, things have shifted, and in this case, in a time where the incumbent government was going to be held to their account of an affordability and everything else that Canada's been going through, is now having the advantage, because when there are conversations with the United States and elsewhere, you have leader Mark Carney become Prime Minister Carney. He's at the podium, he's speaking, and if you notice, he does not have any of his cabinet ministers behind him, because nobody wants to remember those days, right? Nobody wants to see Chrystia Freeland. Nobody wants to see...
That's a very important point. I never thought of it.
Right? He's alone. Usually you don't have the leader alone. Usually you have their people behind them to say, here's my lineup of people that are going to serve you, my front bench. Whereas, he's alone because he's the new politician. So not, even though he's the prime minister, but everybody, is looking at him as somebody from the outside, even though the Conservative line is that, he was the economic advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and a lot of those policies were really Mark Carney's. But do Canadians care about that? It seems not, because they seem to be in love with his CV. He does have a very impressive CV, unlike many people running in politics, right? He's and the positions he's held on the boards he's sat at are positions that when prime ministers serve their term and they step down, they hope to have those seats as board of directors, and so what. And Carney's at 59 or 60, so he's at a good prime age as well. So people are in love with his CV, and also they've noticed that since he became prime minister, you have the shift in President Trump's rhetoric on 51st state, Governor Carney or Governor whoever. Tariffs, or join us and it'll be better for you. The talk of annexation has stopped. So there's, since they had that conversation, it's to be said that that time Prime Minister Carney, or was he Liberal? He's either Prime Minister or Liberal leader, depending on what hat he's wearing, based on the issue that he has to deal with. They had that conversation, and that therefore, just this past few days, where it was Liberation Day, and as President Trump announced his tariffs on his universal tariffs and country by country tariffs, Canada and Mexico were not on there, and that was something that Canada was, holding its breath to see what else does it mean when it comes to the universal tariffs that Trump was going to put on. And so a lot of people are looking at it saying, okay, so the day where Canada's not part of the tariffs, although, mind you, the auto tariffs, the auto sector that's being hit, which is the 25% if the auto is not manufactured in the United States. So that means 12.5%, because half of that, when it comes to parts, is made in Canada. So even though at a time where Canada's still reeling from its tariffs on steel and aluminum and what happened with the auto sector, but it wasn't added onto the universal tariff list that all the other countries are now experiencing what Canada's been going through. But it was also the same day where the carbon tax was removed, so you had gas 23 cents cheaper if you put gas in your car from just a few days ago. And so all optics show it's all about optics, right? Like who is leading all these changes, bringing stability or making things affordable. And it falls on Mark Carney, and this is the person who was pro-carbon tax. So it's very interesting how he's at a time where he's not being held accountable for being Trudeau's advisor economically or being pro-carbon tax. But because he got rid of the carbon tax and he's been able to somehow speak some sort of a language to Donald Trump, President Trump, who's now been a lot easier on Canada in terms of showing a little bit more respect, although I don't think we're safe and we're not out of the waters and anything could shift at any time, but it was a massive shift that we've seen. So that's why, as you say, the numbers and all those ridings in Ontario, it's because of the leader.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more that you just mentioned. Yeah, you're right. I mean, everything has changed since Mark Carney has, taken the helm of affairs. He's become the Liberal Party leader. He's become the Prime Minister. And you're right. I've seen him more at ease when he's doing press conferences as a Prime Minister. And he, obviously he's being asked more tougher questions as the Liberal leader. I have not seen him at ease there, whether because of the French language or his pronunciation there, or maybe his grip on issues in Quebec or in certain areas. Maybe he's not that familiar because he's been, with Goldman Sachs, then he was the governor of Canada, governor of England, then managing Brookfield Asset Management and so many other things. So maybe the nitty-gritty things are really at the grassroots level, and I see a bit of an unease when he's campaigning as a Liberal leader. But as a Prime Minister, he seems to be at ease, other than the issue that he had there in England with Rosemary Barton and other journalists, because maybe that was one of his initial press conferences as a Prime Minister. But then other than that, he's been at ease, he's been very comfortable. He comes across as, someone who's ready to govern. So now what do the Conservatives do at this moment? I mean, other than I know for a fact that, yes, they have to do something very different in GTA. Mm-hmm. But you're right, you've got a very good point that the message has to come from the national level. That's how all these ridings would change. So what should be the Conservative strategy now? So
the Conservative strategy, which has been said for quite some time, and we're still, we're midway in this election cycle, is that, the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, is still running a campaign against Mark Carney and the Trudeau Liberals and the Mark Carney Trudeau Liberals, or, carbon tax Carney. And those things were really great, when Trudeau was around. But all of that has shifted, right? You got to read the pulse of what people care about right now, and people care about Trump. And that is the biggest thing. Yes, unaffordability is a massive thing, but the Trump tariffs are going to make things a lot more unaffordable. It's going to be a recession. It's going to be job losses. It's going to be sectors that are going to be impacted that are not in steel, aluminum, and automotive, but because it's a global recession, right? So that's the key thing. And so on a day where President Trump announced the automotive tariffs, you had Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre talk about tax-free savings account. So off message, and then another time talk about fentanyl. So, it's you got to be able to pivot, and that's been part of the criticism that's been held on him. That how is he not pivoting the messaging that the Conservatives need to have to talk about what Canadians care about? The things he's talking about Canadians care about was 4 months ago, or maybe 5 months ago. Now things are a lot more different. Even what Canadians cared about a month ago is so much more different. I mean, of course, since Trump, it's all about Trump, right? So that's, we've seen the shift in that, where now he's on message on the tariffs, because really this is not an election. And then this is the same campaign we saw Doug Ford run. He wasn't running an election campaign provincially against Liberal leader or NDP leader. he was running as to run for premier. He was still running a campaign against President Trump. And we saw that, he was able to get another third majority. When we saw the Liberal leader provincially run a campaign on just normal provincial issues and against Doug Ford, it didn't do so well. She didn't even win her own seat, right? Bonnie Crombie we're talking about. So that's important. And that's why you had the, this is of note, again, the campaign manager of Doug Ford, Corey Tenaik, who served as the communications director for Prime Minister Stephen Harper, and who's a conservative and a conservative operative, and he ran Doug Ford's 3 election cycles, 2018 and 2022 and 2025, and won 3 majority elections. He went on to the media, which is very unlikely for a conservative veteran operative to go on the media and say that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are off message. So you have that line of attack coming, and it's not necessarily an attack. There's some justifications of what he's saying, but voicing that publicly already shows that there seems to be tension on the federal campaign as it's going on. So how do the Conservatives make it back? Well, this next week is very important for the Conservatives because, now that they're talking about Trump, we're talking about tariffs. What are they going to do in a time where the tariffs will be there? We don't know how long they're going to be there. What does it mean for businesses? We've heard Pierre Poilievre talk about, the counter tariffs, whatever money that comes in will go to those sectors, will not be held by the government. At the same time, Mark Carney is taking a lot of those conservative ideas, like removing the carbon tax, like the money that comes in from the tariffs, putting it back into the sectors that are most affected. So Mark Carney is really taking the Liberals to the center, where you had Justin Trudeau really take it to the left into NDP territory, which is the interesting thing, because you think it leaves a vacuum for the left, but Jagmeet Singh's not doing well. So there's a vacuum for the left. That seems to be because Mark Carney's brought the Liberals to the center where Pierre Poilievre was on many of these issues. So now the pivot has to be, does Pierre Poilievre take the Conservatives more to the right? And to be able to secure that, because Mark Carney's really taking a lot. And so what does that mean? So there are Liberals who are fiscally responsible, right? So there's the tent of Liberals, and there's Liberals who are very left, there are Liberals who are very moderate, and there's Liberals who are fiscally conservative. They were probably going to vote for Pierre Trudeau. Sorry, what am I saying? They were going to vote for Pierre Poilievre from 5 months ago, right? Well, we saw Pierre Poilievre's numbers doing so well. Now they could come back to the Liberal Party because of Mark Carney. Then you also have all kinds of conservatives. You have social conservatives. You have fiscal conservatives who are conservative on finances, but generally liberal on social matters. They are also being attracted to Mark Carney because he's going to the center. And at a time where you have the economy at risk, do you elect an economist or do you elect a politician, right? So that's the other thing. So as there's attacks made on Carney and his record, really are Canadians looking for an economist and somebody who says, hey, Canada is going through a hard time, so I put up my hand, regardless of what happened with Brookfield's asset management in terms of taking HQ down to the United States? Are Canadians going to care about that, or are they going to say, Mark Carney's the man of the hour? Are they going to care about his, offshore accounts and all the things that don't seem so Canadian? Do they care about those things, or advising Justin Trudeau and them not liking Justin Trudeau? Or do they say, this is the man of the hour because he's got the experience, he's an economist, we need the economist, and also we've seen you as Prime Minister because you talked to President Trump, you saw King Charles, and you went to see our allies in the UK and France, and now we've seen you in the role. And those are things that the Pierre Poilievre hasn't had a chance to do. He hasn't had a chance to go see King Charles. He hasn't had a chance to get on the phone with President Trump. He hasn't had the chance to do any of that. And the other thing is that the media is not allowed to usually. So the Liberals have the media with them at all the events. When it comes to the Conservative campaign, the media has to find their way to the campaign events, and so the Conservatives are not getting the same sort of coverage because they didn't bring along the media the same way. And there's been a lot of news that's come out that they're, asking the media what questions are you going to ask of the leader, will allow you or not allow you, will allow you a follow-up question or not. So you do need the media. Like, regardless, this is a national campaign, and the only way people are going to know what you're saying, okay, yes, they can go to your YouTube channel and they can go to your social media to see what you posted, but really you need to be on the news and covered by mainstream and ethnic and all kinds of media to be able to cover you. And so the level of exposure Mark Carney has, whether he's just the Liberal leader or Prime Minister Carney, is incomparable to the other leaders. Now, the other thing is there is going to be the English and French language debates that are going to come up that are 10 days before Election Day. And we already know the bar is very low for Mark Carney being a debater. We already know that he's not the best debater. We saw him in the leadership debate, and that wasn't even a debate. That was a conversation between the Liberals, and they were all very nice to each other. So I think the bar is also low. So we do expect to see Pierre Poilievre perform because Pierre Poilievre has been known as the party bulldog, right? And meaning what that means is he's been very good at prosecuting from an opposition standpoint, right? So we saw him prosecuting. Do you remember Bill Marneau when he was finance minister? We saw him prosecuting, Justin Trudeau. He's very good at that, right? So now also we need to see Pierre Poilievre more statesman-like, because people, when they want their prime minister, they don't need that sort of attack, personality, aggressive personality. So now the Conservatives also need to get someone else to do that line of attack and have the leader. This is like politics 101. You can't, the leader can't be the aggressive guy. It has to be the statesman, has to be the calm, collective, and, be able to articulate. And so that's the other shift that Pierre Poilievre has to make to be more prime ministerial, which he's shown. He's shown us he's able to do that. We've seen him in many different settings where he's able to do that. But then there's that other side of that comes out that he's been doing for many different terms, which is the sort of not investigative style, but the more, a prosecutorial side of how he does things. So we're going to see that. So we're going to see the debate. He's going to perform very well, of course. And of course, Jagmeet Singh, he's, also a veteran politician. So Mark Carney's probably not going to do as well on the debate, but is it going to be held against him? Is it not? I don't think debates finalize everything because you still have those 10 days that's going to be seen. So it's going to be very competitive, but Mark Carney is right now, like, the way things have been positioned in terms of what's happening with the United States, what's happening with the global climate, what's happening with the economy, he's getting all that airtime.
Yeah, and do you think that all those issues, as you were mentioning earlier, we've seen that. You're right. I mean, Bonnie Crombie, she spoke about the right issues. I mean, healthcare, she spoke a lot about healthcare. She even promised a family doctor. She spoke about so many other important issues, but they were not resonating because here is, Premier Ford positioning himself as the Captain Canada. So whether there were very important issues regarding affordability, housing, healthcare, education, Bonnie Crombie was talking all that, but they didn't really resonate. So here also at the federal level, X the tax, or we're going to give you a break. I mean, the recent policy that I heard, people really appreciated that yes, you are able to invest, the capital gains back into the Canadian, businesses, and then maybe you get a break for some time, which was good. But then all these policies are not really resonating. I mean, there were issues of affordability, there were issues of housing, there were issues of crime, there were issues of job quality of life, so many other things. all gone?
Well, no, because if we're in a recession and we're all more poor as a result of tariffs and losing industries, then if I don't have money to put in a tax-free savings account, if I don't have money to buy a house, what difference does it make?
Okay.
Right? You need to have money, and then with the money you have, give me policies of how I can best spend this money to save as much as I can. But if I have no money coming in, then all the fabulous ideas that are there about how to invest my money or what to do with my money, it's irrelevant to me, right? I need to be able to have money first. And having money first means having an economy that's not tariffed, that 70+% of our exports go to the United States. And even if you are working in an industry that doesn't export to the United States, our economy relies on it. And jobs rely on it. We're talking about 500,000 jobs in Ontario. But then we're also talking about those coffee shops, those restaurants, those those retail stores, and all those things that rely on the people to spend in those places like Windsor and all these other plants. There are communities that are just catered to that have a ripple effect. And if we're in a recession, then if you're selling a house, you're not selling a house. If you're somebody who's selling mortgage, you're not selling a mortgage. If you're somebody who's selling insurance, you're not selling insurance, because people are not doing it. So it just has this domino effect. So thank you for telling me about how to invest my money, but if I have no money, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, great point. Another thing I want to discuss with you, have you seen, that Vision Canada document somewhere? Because tariffs is definitely a challenge, but we need to have short-term planning for the next 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. How do we deal with this thing? But then to really take our position at a global stage and really make sure that yes, Canadians are going to be good for the next many years, 10, 15, 20, 50 or 100 years. I mean, we need to work on many things. We need to have that sort of infrastructure, which I don't see a lot of talk on, building an infrastructure for the future, 20, 50, 100 years. We need to have infrastructure in all areas. I mean, artificial intelligence is coming. So what are the Canada's strength? What could be our strengths? So is it artificial intelligence? Are we really going to do something about our natural resources, make that our strength? Is tourism going to be one of the key pieces in our future? Is oil, energy supply still going to be our key feature? So that vision for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, that seems to be missing. And I strongly believe, I don't want to take too much time today because I want to listen from you as well, because I've discussed this earlier as well, but Canada in the next 10 to 20 years, we can become a global power. I know there's no exact definition for a global power, or there's no exact definition for a superpower as well. We may or may not become a superpower in the 30, 40, 50 years, but at least just to become a global power. We're a G7 nation. I mean, there are countries whose economies are getting stronger and stronger. Look at the infrastructure. You've been to India recently. Look at the infrastructure for China. Look at the infrastructure for Singapore, South Korea, Japan, India. So these countries are building massive, massive infrastructure. And of course, US already has a lead from many other countries. US has an amazing infrastructure. Of course, now they're having their own challenges as well. But let me talk about Canada. I mean, we're having infrastructure deficit right now in almost every single municipality that you talk. Infrastructure deficit in education, infrastructure deficit in healthcare. Everywhere there's infrastructure deficit. I can't see that. And I think that's one of the ways of, among other ways, that we invest heavily. That'll help us generate more jobs, good economy, and how do we move around people, and then that's going to help us.
Yeah, okay, so it's many-fold. I think it's multiple things at the same time. So yeah, you do need the short-term investment, which is what we're hearing these parties talk about when it comes to, in a way, doing a bailout of some of these sectors. And this comes at, I look at the world as like before COVID and then after COVID, right? Because COVID really shifted everything when it came to the amount of money the government gave and zero interest rates, and then it led to inflation. So the people are looking at like, what are you going to do to save jobs? What are you going to do so people don't lose their homes? What are you going to do for all of that? And then there's the infrastructure, there's the housing, so multiple things. So security is number one. right? We need to be able to have secure borders, right? When it comes to northern Canada, when it comes to all aspects of Canada, because we do know that this is why President Trump is interested in Greenland. We do have, many things changing when it comes to the northern border, and Canada has not been investing in its military or that effort, the same way in the last decade and plus. So there's a lot of catch up we have to do there, and perhaps we look at something where, there's a lot of countries where, when you're 18, you just go get military training, right? Whether it's a year or 2 years, and obviously there's a compensation that comes out. That doesn't mean you need to go to war, but there's a level of training. Is that a good idea? Maybe something we need to look at, because, why wouldn't it be a good idea to understand about, your Canadian heritage, making sure that these are trained people for Canadian security, but also, I think part of our identity is, when you ask somebody, where are you from? They say, oh, I'm from such country, and then Canadian. Really, we don't. Whereas when you talk to Americans and you say, where are you from? They don't say, oh, I'm Mexican American. They say, I'm American, right? Whereas here it's like, oh, I'm Indian Canadian, right? It's so maybe that's that part of that shift. So military and security is very, very important, and I think we can't ignore that. So that's that. And then also Canada being able to go up to that 2% GDP to be part of NAFTA. Like these are just things that we can't ignore, right? At that. And then there is, you're right, AI. You can't avoid that, because that is, in a very short period of time, it's going to take a lot of jobs and a lot of industries. And we can't have people that are not trained in those sectors, because, as we lose sectors, there's also opportunities where new industries show up, right? And that's happened, like when it comes to e-commerce, right? We thought for a while e-commerce is going to replace physical stores, retail stores. No, retail stores are there. We were using e-commerce a lot more, but what did it do? It created an entire industry on e-commerce where there's like zero barrier to entry. You can have all sorts of credit card processing. You can have all ways to be able to distribute. You can go online. So yeah, AI is of course important, because we need to just go away from just like real estate and immigration and that's it, right? We need to have industry, and yes, in a world where wars happen because of natural resources. What war hasn't happened because of natural resources? Really, I mean, I know we say it's because of ideology and it's because of religion, and really it's about natural resources. So natural resources have always been important, it'll always be important. So we gotta have a strategy of having a fine line between having climate policy and also looking at our natural resources and how we can contribute to the world economy, because Canada's rich in that, but having that balance of what do we do? Like, so it's not about exploiting all our natural resources, and having a climate policy. So that's important. So you can't avoid AI, because that's where things are, and it's going to propel, and it's going to be the future in a bigger way than it is right now. You can't ignore natural resources, because oil and gas are needed, everything else that's needed. Even if you want to have an EV world, you still need lithium, you still need natural resources. You need security in a world where everybody is now looking at self-protectionism, right? It's no longer like, oh, we're allies on ideology. No, it's like, it's very transactional, and security is very important, especially having President Trump make the claims he has. I think we need to take that very seriously. I'm not saying they're going to annex us, but it wakes you up saying, well, where is our level of security? Why are we relying on the United States to pay for the fair share on NAFTA, and we don't do it, and yet we show up. NATO, yeah. So those are things that we can't ignore anymore. And then of course infrastructure is important, because if you are going to have a strategy on natural resources and having mobilizing people to work and having an efficient marketplace, then you do need to have infrastructure to get to places. And that's important. India didn't become, in terms of like their GDP expansion and becoming, a bigger player in their economy if they didn't build infrastructure. They had to build infrastructure. Same with China. Really, we need to update the infrastructure. So it's some multiple things that need to be done on a very efficient level, and so hopefully whichever party that wins this election has very credible and competent ministers that are going to go into place to be able to do all these multiple things at the same time. I think that's our biggest hope, that we can have a very competent level of cabinet members that are going to be thinking this way, and of course the short-term planning of like obviously bailouts and what they need to do with industries, but all those other things need to be covered too.
One of the things that I see missing as well, many of the youngsters who would plan to vote, I mean, I'm talking about the age category from 18 to 35. Let's talk about them. So those, who are in the age category of 18 to 35, of course, the tariffs would affect them as well. It's going to affect everyone. But they are looking at, education. They're looking at their anxieties regarding affordable housing for them. Obviously, this is the time they're planning their finance as well. They're planning to pick up life partners as well. They're planning to build their careers, pick up some affordable housing. So what is in it for them in this elections for those who are 18 to 35?
Yeah, and that's something that the leaders have to talk about. I know Carney's talking. I mean, before I say Carney, Pierre Poilievre did really well the last 2 years speaking to those age groups, saying,
1835?
Yeah, because talking about how you can't buy a house, you're still, he talks about the line of like, you're living in your parents' basement, you can't get ahead, he was able to hit those pain points and that was very effective. That's why the Conservatives were right on message on those things, and they had the 27-point lead over the Liberals these past 2 years. But now that it's shifted, yes, those things still are the case, but now it's been amplified with Trump tariffs, right? So it's like, if you couldn't afford it before Trump, now without, with a recession on the loom, how are you going to afford it, right? So there's a lot of that, and we saw with the tariffs, the universal tariffs on Liberation Day that was announced by President Trump, we saw the stock market take a plunge. We've seen industries being massively affected, and we haven't even entered the era of what it means for all the other countries that have tariffs that we trade with, and what's going to do to their economy. I think, if anything, the biggest impact, I'm going to pivot here on Ukraine, is I don't think Ukraine's going to get any more funding from any other country, because they're right now so busy trying to manage what's going to happen in their own country when it comes to a recession. So I think that ends the war in that sense, because the funding, how is it going to come? You think Europe's going to be like, here you go, here's more money to fight Russia. So that's the other implication, because it's going to massively push President Zelensky to sign that deal with the United States for natural resources extraction, because who else is going to come, right? Who else is going to be there? So I think also the universal tariffs is going to, not only does it change global when it comes to global trade, but also impacts wars. It stops wars. Yes. Yes.
At this point, why don't we shift, because that's our last topic for the day. Y Media Foreign Policy Report. Tariffs. So we will talk about that, and then we'll call it a day. Regarding Donald Trump's tariffs, you're talking about Russia, Ukraine. Tariffs. He's hit with massive tariffs from Canada to UK to China, Vietnam, India, all those countries. He was showing a billboard style, his board, and then he had all these countries lined up, that these are the countries who've been putting tariffs on us. And of course, Donald Trump was saying that yes, it's been very challenging for US, because of all these protectionist policies by other countries, and now it's reciprocal tariffs. It's time for him. But I think again, I could be wrong. And you just mentioned, the stock market. They're the first to react, and they know this is. They think so for now. That this may not be right policy. Of course, I've heard some of the supporters of Donald Trump. They're saying, "Oh, it was just a correction. We've seen the stock market go up. Now it's just a correction." Yes, the correction always happens, but then the stock market. U.S. has been attracting investment from across the globe. U.S. has been doing very well. The economy was good. Job numbers are good. So you've been attracting investment from all across the globe. You've been at the forefront of the technology innovations. Everything comes from US, right? And I don't even see there wasn't any need to disrupt all this. And disruption for good, fine. But then you're disrupting all these things. So I think
He's doing it because he can.
he's doing it because he can. But is there any benefit of that?
Well, he's on his last term, and okay. So here's the benefit. The benefit being, and I'm going to talk about it from the American standpoint, is it made Americans realize and remember what a superpower they are. Like when their president can just say things from the Oval Office and then have press conferences and markets react, and everybody's eyes were on what President Trump was going to announce, at the White House, what he called Liberation Day. He knows how to make good TV, and he says it. Like when we saw the argument that erupted between President Zelensky and VP Vance, President Trump said, I kept this going because it's going to make good TV. And he knows how to make good TV, and he loves the spotlight, and he's doing it because he can. And tomorrow, if he says, okay, guys, I'm going to remove it, you're going to tell me that country's going to be like, no, we don't want a trade agreement? Everyone's going to say yes. Everybody wants access to the American market. It's the world superpower when it comes to economy, and you want to sell to Americans because Americans have purchase power, right? So that reminds Americans where they are, because Americans went through very hard times through the years of Biden and everything else, where they're doing massive bailouts and they're sending so much money to other countries, but they don't have proper infrastructure. They don't have access to health care the same way we do. They don't have access to education. If you can't afford university, which will cost you $100,000 plus, you're going to go to a community college. Like, the difference between the haves and the have-nots is serious in the United States. And so this is even though they're going to be impacted because, of the counter tariffs and the tariffs that they've put on, but it also reminds them of who they are and what they can do. And for them to say 20% on EU, that also, guess what? Those European countries want to sell into America, right? So that reminds them of everything. And perhaps it has a shift because, there has been a time where and that's a completely different topics about, about people being ambitious enough when it comes to certain genders. Like, we're seeing like the decline of like the masculinity. We have in many different, when it comes to, that's a whole nother topic and we can get into it because I don't want to divert too much. But I think the benefit was that in terms of understanding the level of strength that they have and remembering it, because I think they always knew, but now they see it. And they know that we're at the mercy, all of us. Everybody's at their mercy. And when they say we want to be friends again, we're going to say, okay. Who's going to say no? Who's going to say no? I'm not going to pick up. I'm not going to call President Trump, or I'm not going to pick up his calls. And when President Trump wants to play nice, who's going to say no? I'm mad at you.
Okay,
who's going to say that?
Okay, here's my point. Then here's my point. When you say that yes, if you want to play nice, when Donald Trump is going to say, okay, I want to be friends again with you, I don't think so. Germany would ever. I'll start with Germany. I don't think so. Germany's already said that US is not a trustworthy partner. We need to build our own economy. We need to strengthen our own economy. We need to build our own defense system. Germany. Same with England as well. So they say no. Same with Canada as well. Mark Carney clearly said this. It's over. The relationship is over. We cannot rely on US. And now the Canadians also know more than ever. A 90-year-old alliance has been completely shattered. Russia would say thanks, but no thanks. Well, there was a time we would, exporting $90 billion, but we've very clearly circumvented. Maybe $2 to $3 billion is our export to you. We don't need US at all. That's what Russia is for you today. You've already had enough sanctions on that side. So now Russia is circumventing that. China and India China and India for most of their part, they have put reciprocal tariffs. Of course, China could be hurt. Of course, India would be hurt. But then at the end of the day, they are much bigger economies. They have their own domestic consumption as well. And then I don't think so. I mean, we're putting tariffs on. We've already spared pharma. So India said, okay, fine, you can't do without our medicine. I mean, it'll be more of a headache tomorrow to pay more. I mean, the billions of dollars that pharma export is done from India, US said, fine, we can't do anything about it. Right?
Only a matter of time.
Yeah?
Only a matter of time until they have their own pharma.
Good question. Pharma, even if they start producing there, it's going to cost them a lot more than to produce pharma in India. It's a very established sector. When Canada thought we're going to, create our own vaccines, India had enough vaccine to take care of its own citizens and distribute all over the world. And when former Prime Minister Trudeau, when he announced funding that we're going to build our own pharma, our own vaccine, here we are in 2025, and the next 5 years, I doubt we would be even generating vaccine for 1 million people here in Canada. It's not that easy. It takes years and years on. And there are people who would want to invest in the forefronts of technology. And why investors are pulling out money from US? They say, no, you're heading towards, America of, 1915 or 1920, 1940 America. This is 2025 US. The investors are clearly saying this. Every single economist is saying this. No, these policies are wrong. You look at look at the Economist front page. Look at the front page of Wall Street Journal. Look at the MSNBC. All the economists are saying we don't see any reason out of it. And they're not even able to give us any timeline how long this pain will end. And the Americans who were looking for lower inflation, they're saying, oh, forget inflation. Inflation is not going to go lower anytime soon. Rather, we could see a period of recession coming along. Recession because of all these tariffs and everything. So we have created chaos for no reason.
Well, the benefit, let me continue on the benefits.
Okay.
The benefits, and I'm not disregarding any of the hardship people feel and people who are losing their jobs, but the benefit, again, has also been it woke up the rest of the world. It put Canada, we've been sleeping for so long. We've just had our ideologies of how human rights, great, okay. Yeah. How should other countries behave under human rights? Okay, great. Yeah. We're talking about all sorts of stuff. Everything from if you identify as this, should you use the opposite bathroom? Should a teacher wear prosthetic breasts to class? And we're talking about all sorts of stuff. Should we have bike lanes and should we have everything? Guess what? Economy matters. Guess what? You need businesses. Guess what? If there's no business and there's no jobs, guess what matters? Right now with the Stellantis plant, you were a union, yeah? Union closed for 2 weeks. What do you need? You need hard cash. You need businesses. You need to be pro-business. You need to have people who are going to take the risk, put their own money to open up a business. If it does well, hire more people. We've been so capitalism is bad. It's been the greatest thing for the economy that's worked. Socialism works? All those other things work? Capitalism has been, it has its downsides, but the reason you buy a house, the reason you're able to wear shoes, buy food, buy these things, because you have income coming. That's when we can talk about tax-free savings account. That's when we can talk about how to invest. So everybody woke up. It's no longer, Jagmeet Singh of the, bad corporations, bad business, this is the bit. You need business. You need people who are going to create jobs. You need a place for people to go to have jobs. You need to be able to sell into a marketplace to earn a living. How are you earning a living? It's not government job. Even government job, it comes from people's taxes because they went to work and they paid taxes, so you as a government worker can have an income, right? Because somebody went to work. If they didn't go to work, you'd have to pay them, right? So the whole reality of us talking about what's right, what's wrong, and just forgetting the basics, right? The basics of strong, secure borders. Everybody should go to military. Now, I'm not saying go to deployment for war, but everybody should get trained. Why not? Why shouldn't we have a fit country. Why not? We have a lot of young people. Why not? When we talk about, we should incentivize people for starting a business. And we say, no, capitalism is bad. It's this, it's that, it's exploiting. All of this talk for so long, no one's saying it anymore. Everyone's saying, no, we want our jobs. We want to go to work, right? And
work from home, work culture.
Work from home, exactly. If you and all of this stuff, the whole culture of boys playing in girls' sports and saying no, and then all of this stuff where if somebody said, if you ask a question, no, you're racist, and you can't, I can't ask a question because otherwise if I ask it, I'm racist, or I'm bigoted, or I'm sexist, all the accusations. What happened to all that? What's the media cycle like now? No one's talking about those things. Why? Because people need jobs. People need to get paid. They need to earn a living. We've gone back to the lowest common denominator, which is I need to live and I need to just pay for things to be able to survive and live. And this is the gift Donald Trump has given us. And I'm not saying I'm sitting here as a Trump supporter, but I'm also not ignorant to know the ripple effects of what it's done to all of us. We have to look at the big picture, right? This isn't the woke culture of if you're saying something what positively came out, you must be a Trump supporter, so we hate you. No, that's woke culture. We're talking about the reality that it woke up Canada. It woke up the rest of the world on their Liberation Day when they saw these tariffs.
Was that the intended purpose, that yes, they wanted to wake up everyone, or let makes America?
Who cares? I think we can't read what Trump's what's in his mind, and who cares?
No, but his slogan was "Let's make America wealthy again."
Well,
how is America going to get wealthy again?
Apple said $500 million, AI $500 million investment. Companies are closing up shop, from like Steve Madden in China and Apple in China and everybody else. They're coming back home because they don't want to deal with the tariffs. So guess what? Some of the greatest minds are there, and if they're not, what they do is they send them on H-1B visas and they bring them in to be able to work in those sectors.
So we're again going to create a manufacturing economy. We had an economy based on service industry. We had an economy based on technology in US. So do we want to create an economy based on manufacturing once again?
It's all of it. All of it matters because you need technology, because we can't rely. Can you live without your phone? Can you live without technology? We can't, right?
Yeah.
Even the fact that we're streaming right now, that's technology. So AI, we have to live with that. We need manufacturing, yeah, because you need this table, you need this chair, you need the car that you're driving or the bicycle that you're riding. That is manufacturing, right?
If we are sending these things offshore and we're getting cheaper products, and we can focus on service industry, we can focus on smart technology.
Americans will think very fast on how to be able to meet those demands. And like you said, like when it comes to pharma and creating a vaccine, everybody's saying we're going to be less dependent. It's not going to happen by tonight. It's not going to even happen by the end of 2025. Becoming less dependent is not going to, we're going to create industries and we're going to boost it's going to happen by next quarter. No, just like how you can't even start pharma and have, vaccines in a country that doesn't have the infrastructure. Europe isn't going to be able to do. It's so good to talk, because you need to sit as a leader, you need to say things that will make your people feel like you have their backs.
That's the point. I've been in auto industry, I've even worked in auto industry. Now to put up a plant,
Yeah.
you need to first of all look at the place where I'm going to put up a plant, vendors, skilled labor, so many other things. So put up a plant, it'll take a minimum of 4 to 6 or even 8 years, billions of dollars, right? And here it was working well from Mexico, from Canada, we sourced all those things. It was working well.
You'll be surprised how fast things will develop when you need
to. There's no way you can put up an auto plant in a couple of years.
And I don't think it's going to, these tariffs will come to the side, because it's really going to impact the American, cars,
consumer.
like consumer, but American brand like Chrysler and Jeep and Ford and all of that. It's going to, of course, affect the American brands, and it's going to hit home. But this is a nice wake-up call. This is a nice wake-up call for everybody to be like, oh, I have a contract and I have a union job and we're going to be fine. Okay, well, what is this thing that we're hearing about? What is the Canadian car? What is the Canadian car? right? And what, so this actually holds everybody so much more accountable of being able to say, okay, we can have trading partners, we have these agreements in place, but what is plan B, C, D? You run a business, right? You know that, like, you were affected during COVID. You saw people like, sorry, we can't do ads, we can't, like, what funds people watching a free program? It's because there are people who pay for advertising dollars, right? And when somebody says, I'm sorry, right now my bottom line doesn't allow me to spend on advertising, media gets hit, right? That's a real thing. So what happened? You thought of plan B, C, D. You're like, yeah, obviously when the advertisers come back, I'm going to say welcome, but how else do I diversify? How else is it going to be in real estate? Is it going to be in this? But it got you thinking. It got you creating contingency plans. It got, and that's what we're seeing right now, which is a massive benefit than everybody just being like, oh, it's status quo. We're just going to carry on because, our trading partner is fine and we have agreements in place, and saying, no, things have changed. And guess what? We do better during hard times, right? Whose personality and whose strength hasn't developed during hard times, right? Because eventually, yeah, it's hard, but then you got to then say, okay, what do I do now? How do I respond? And so we're seeing these leaders, and that's why you're seeing the conservatives kind of lagging behind, because Pierre Poilievre is not pivoting fast enough. He's talking about fentanyl, he's talking about tax-free savings account. Awesome, but let's stick to the times of what's happening right now. And that's why Mark Carney, who's pro-carbon taxes, I'm going to repeal it, doesn't work.
But most of this pain will be for common Americans. And Donald Trump built all his case to come back to power, that yes, ordinary Americans, you're facing so many challenges. So they're going to face challenges even more. Job losses, inflation.
Yes.
Right? Everything is going to get expensive. From clothes to footwear to toys to cars to everything is going to get expensive. And you have a recession as well. So where do I see the purpose of doing all this? Of course, you're right. I mean, the basic intention seems to be great, and I couldn't agree more the points that you've made, that yes, America, yes, you've been taken for a ride. I mean, everywhere in the world, you have to pay money for all those US aid and everything. And some of the times where you're paying the aid and you have people being hostile towards US, of course you have to look at it, right? They're tightening their borders, which is good, yeah. So that's good. Then of course you need to make sure if there are protectionist policies being applied against US, you need to also apply protectionist policies, which is good. But it's not even a zero-sum game. It's taking things into the negative territory in terms of GDP, recession, inflation numbers are going high. Tomorrow, the common Americans are going to suffer more, and we don't even know when are we going to come out of this cycle. I mean, we haven't got a timeline. Okay, fine. All this pain is for 2 years. Fine. We would deal with that.
It'll definitely be before midterms elections, and it could even be sooner than that, right? Midterm elections, and he's not going to, it's going to affect a lot of the Republican states, and so we're going to see things shift very rapidly. But also, like, the Americans spend a lot of money in the service industry, so that's going to change, with the bigger vision of like bringing back manufacturing and all those other things. But it's just like how it quickly went on, just like how remember we had lockdown orders when during COVID, lockdown, and then there was job losses and employment rate went up, and then as soon as the lockdown order was lifted and everybody went back, job numbers went up. It's going to be the same thing. As soon as the tariffs go away, you think if America removes the tariffs on Canada, Canada's going to say no, we're going to keep the tariffs on you? No. Canada's going to say, okay, we remove it too.
Then what was this whole purpose?
It woke everybody up, and we all needed to wake up because no one's talking about woke stuff anymore. No one is so righteous over capitalism anymore. No one is, no one's doing this anymore. Why? Why? Because we went back to the basics of what works, right? And we went back to the basics of not being entitled, of saying, oh, we have everything at our disposal, let's take it for granted, and now let's talk about social things that, how do you feel, how do I feel, and let's debate that. No, go to work, earn a living, respect the people that are creating jobs, respect the people that are opening up businesses, support them, support local business, like basic stuff. And I'm not saying, the social stuff, yeah, everybody has what is in their life. You leave them alone. They're entitled to their own opinion. You're entitled to your own opinion. This whole cancel culture of like, oh, you said this and now you're canceled. No one's canceling anyone anymore. Why? Because everybody's worried about the economy. No one's saying, oh, we're canceling you because you said something 20 years ago and therefore, you know, you don't count anymore because all our income is fine and everything is fine. So now we're just taking up our time talking about, you know, you said something wrong, so we're going to cancel you. Nobody's doing that anymore. What happened to it? What happened? It died. It blew, it's smoke, gone. But now we have politicians who are realizing, oh, we got to do some real stuff. We have people like Justin Trudeau step down.
Big price to pay, as much as you're saying the reset button or all this.
Reset.
Yeah.
And who doesn't need a reset? Have you done a cleanse? Your body needs a reset, right? Your sleep is a reset for every day that ends, a reset for the next day. Everybody needs a reset.
But a big
reset mentally too.
Big price to pay for a reset.
Reset is always hard. If you've done a cleanse from day 1 to day 3 is hard. If you're somebody who's never been to the gym and you start going to the gym, don't your muscles hurt? Like every time you start something new, it's going to be hard. Like the first time you learned how to drive a car, you felt uncomfortable.
Wasn't there an easier way to do all this just in case we really wanted to achieve what we're talking right now?
I mean, there's always nicer ways to do things, such as over time and incrementally. But then if you've ever done a fast weight drop, you go through something very, you'll do a massive shift cleanse, you'll cut out, your carbs and oil and this sugars, and then your body goes into a massive reaction, but then you drop immediately a few pounds and then you set yourself up to feel less inflammation, less pain, more energy, so now you can work out. It's always that, and I'm not comparing it to the job losses of a cleanse, but hard things happen in a short period of time, and that's why it's.
So now, would the Americans start manufacturing, clothing? I mean, this clothing was much cheaper from Vietnam, China, Cambodia, India, Bangladesh. So now we're putting tariffs on Bangladesh, India, China, Vietnam. So now we're going to manufacture clothing on our own, we're going to manufacture footwear on our own, we're going to manufacture what all things are going to
What's happened now, it's given an opportunity for American businesses to be able to also export. Right? Obviously the currency is so much higher compared
to... But there are reciprocal tariffs. China has put reciprocal tariffs, India has put... Where are we going to export? Actually, as a matter of fact, our exports are going to drop down now. Our exporters are going to face tough time in exporting Canada, let alone exporting in China or in Vietnam. And what, I mean, we're talking American dollars here. When we are paying any worker who are, if you're going to create why service industry thrived in Canada or in US. Okay, let's talk about Canada. Out of the 18 million workers in Canada, 16 million are working in service industry. 16 million out of the 18 million, right? Why we have an economy in US based on technology and service industry, because these are the things you cannot import from outside. That was the reason. Other than that, I mean, go to Warren Buffett and tell him, okay, fine, I'm putting in $5 billion. All I want is $500 million from your side. We're going to put up, a manufacturing industry. We're going to create TVs. So is he going to invest in, start manufacturing TVs? Absolutely. TVs can come at a much cheaper rate because the labor is, very less expensive there. So if you have a cheap labor in Vietnam, Cambodia, India, China, cheap labor manufacturing so many things, why would I pay that much to create a big screen TV, 50-inch, 70-inch TV? It can come much cheaper from Asia. Then it's going to cost me a lot more. Even if I start manufacturing tomorrow, the tariffs go away. Then what happens? The policy could change any time. Where's my investment heading? Please.
Yeah, I think the American is going to think twice about spending their dollar, right? Because it's just, do I need this thing, or do I want it, or do I need it? There's going to be obviously that level of thinking, definitely in place. But as he's put on the tariffs, he could remove it next week, and things would shift back. But obviously, no one's going to forget about the traumatic turn of events to be able to now really start investing in their own economy. And I would hate to see Canada reverse on the way it's thinking and moving ahead right now, right? So for example, if tomorrow, if Trump reverses the tariffs and Canada says, oh, we're going to go back to carbon tax and we're going to go back to, we would hate to see that. So it's definitely set all these different nations, and now, you know, Europe and Germany, everywhere you're talking about, on a certain path. For the American, it's going to be hard short term, but this is who they've elected. He's there for 4 years. There's midterms coming up. Things will always shift as they've shifted this way. I mean, what it's showing is that, you know, you can have agreements, you can have laws in place, and he's reneging on it, just like the stock market can shift from up to down, and it's a pulse of what's happening. But this is the world we live in right now, and it's going to make us a lot more agile. I mean, what else are you going to do? What else is there to do?
Since you I'll talk
what
about
else is there to do? What other options? But what else is there to do?
make the lives of Americans better, and there are millions of ways to do that. The lives
Well,
of Americans better.
there's going to be all those industries that are investing money. Those are jobs that are going into America.
No investment. You just mentioned stock market. The investment is taking a flight here, because when you look at the investment or the stock market losses, yes, there have been stock market losses in Germany. The Japanese index I saw, the Chinese index I saw, the Indians, but they have lost a lot less, 1.5%, China 0.6%, so 1.5, 0.6. The losses in those stock markets has been a lot less. So we have inflicted a much bigger blow on our own stock market, and the credibility, and people would think, oh, should I invest or not, that there is a lot of uncertainty. That's the last thing, uncertainty is the last thing that investor would like. They always want certainty. Oh, why don't we invest in a market which is more certain, whether it's China, Japan, Europe, London Stock Exchange, or maybe in India as well, rather than investing in a place which is losing. I mean, his own friend Elon Musk, billions of dollars, he's lost. Tesla has taken a massive hit, to the point that the Vancouver Auto Show, they sent us a press release, because we cover, recently Y Media has been covering auto shows in Chicago, Toronto, Vancouver. We're going to cover from New York to LA, all these auto shows, you know, and then Vancouver Auto Show, we just got on the news, oh, Tesla has been taken off. So why? I mean, people want to watch, actually people love to drive and watch Teslas all the time. This has been our experience covering auto shows. But here they are, for security reasons.
Tesla's become politicized.
Politicized, you know.
Well, you know, this is a chance also for small business to flourish, right? Not big business. Like right now, like with investors holding off on terms of investing in certain industries and big business right now, it's tomorrow if you want to go open up a local thing, I think it takes us back to the mindset of supporting local business, small business. Small business has always been the backbone of any economy, right? It's 70% of any economy in terms of hiring, either being self-employed in terms of a small business or hiring a few people up to 10, whatever, 50, whatever the case is. It also takes us back to that, because either case, the most successful businesses actually started in a recession, and given the hard times that we're going to, there is always opportunity in a crisis.
That part I agree.
There's always opportunity in a crisis, and who has capital can also go in and buy, when it comes to real estate or goods or infrastructure, a lot cheaper, right? So this is just us pivoting. We're going through another cycle, and I think we're going to come out better. I mean, I'm on the positive side of things, because I think this has helped us really get a reality check of things when things change, right? Like things change all the time, and now we're seeing agreements and our partners and our allies change, and that just means, if it's made us a little bit more patriotic, great. If it's brought us all together in terms of supporting each other, great. No longer are we talking about, national divide or, Quebec this or Alberta. Like, it's brought us together in many, many ways. And so let's see what this agenda is going to be in terms of, and I think this is going to also be a massive voter turnout, because people care about what's going on. It's helped us all tune in. Before the times were like, oh, I'm not political. Oh, I don't vote. Oh, I don't know what's happening. No more. You are forced to pay attention to what's happening. If you're not somebody who watches the news, you're somebody who's going to hear about it from a friend, family. You're going to see it on social media. You're going to see it somewhere, and you're going to tune in to say, hey, what does it mean for me? What does it mean for my job? What does it mean for my family? And that's a good thing. that's a good thing that we're all educating ourselves on what's going on, and also thinking about what is the plan, right? Not only on a country level, but also like on a family level. What's the plan? And if you have to think twice about spending, maybe that's not such a bad thing.
Yeah, and as you just mentioned, I was as a journalist, that's my job. I was just trying to have a discussion on that, and I'm still questioning the motive behind all this and what's going to.
Well, the motive is the war is going to end very fast.
Very fast, okay.
Well, yeah. Who is Zelensky gonna call for some money? Who's gonna say, yeah, we have a few $100 million, take it, because our people don't need it? Who's going to say that during these uncertain times? Who's going to say that?
Our people don't need it.
Right? Because right now countries are looking at bailouts for industries that are going to be affected, right? Yeah. For jobs that are going to be lost, for all of that. Who's going to say, here's a few $100 million? Who's going to say that?
Yeah.
No one's going to say that right now. So what does that mean? That ends the war. That also means the parts that are annexed by Russia are going to probably stay annexed. And it also means that Zelensky is going to say, I'm going to need to rebuild my country. So here's the agreement that I'm going to sign to be able to, for the U.S. to extract, natural resources from our country. So we rebuild. That's what's happening. And what NATO is going to say something? No, NATO's right now worried about their economy. They're worried about elections that are around the corner. All those leaders need to run an election cycle, and their people are worried about their industries.
Yeah, I'm always been very positive, and I also think, as you were mentioning, that this is what great leadership is all about. When you're facing an adversary, when you're facing a challenge, come out with bright ideas, and the shake-up. I was talking from the American perspective, but from the Canadian perspective, much needed shake-up. The
shake-up is so good.
Much needed shake-up. Much needed. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Where do you hear Freeland anymore? I know she's running for a re-election, but where do you hear Justin Trudeau, give us a lecture on how we should say humankind instead of mankind, because it's incorrect to say mankind. Like the level of conversations we were having, no more.
And most importantly, what now we're talking about Canada first. Earlier what was happening over here in Canada, all the fights were brought here. So much violent protest happening in Canada. Oh, Russia-Ukraine war, all the discussion, all those violent protests. Middle East, there is an issue, violent protest happening in Canada. Kashmir, Pakistan, India, Iran, anywhere there is an issue, violent protests are happening over here. And now I want to ask this thing, that where were we sleeping all this time? Now suddenly US says, oh, we are not your ally, we want to annex you. Now former Prime Minister Trudeau is saying, oh, they want to make sure our economy collapses and they want to take over. Trudeau, fine. Mark Carney also comes, oh, there is no wants. They want to make sure, they want to break us, and Mark Carney says they want to take over. Okay. 2 consecutive prime ministers are now saying, US, our ally, wants to break our back, wants to collapse our economy and take over. 2 prime ministers are saying this on record, and Mark Carney is saying, oh, it's all over. So now we're realizing, oh, and suddenly we were discussing, a minute ago we were discussing, oh, we're going to fix Russia, Ukraine. Oh, we're going to fix Middle East. Oh, we want to fix India.
Because our ideologies, because we know better and we believe in this and believe in that, and everybody else should, have that way of life. Now we're like, no.
No. My question. Where are your ideas now? You wanted to fix the entire world. Russia, Ukraine.
No, you got to go to work now and make sure you still have a job at the end of the day.
I identify myself as a worker now, or as a Canadian now, or earlier I was
a working Canadian is what you want to be. A working Canadian with purchase power.
With purchase power. Earlier we were all, trying to fix all the global problems, but we had issues here in Canada, and we thought, okay, fine, we'll fix all those problems, but issues over here in Canada, let Y Media discuss that, let Ramona ji, Yudhvir ji discuss that. Oh, these ideas, these discussions are very alien to us. But we wanted to discuss all that. So anyways, we got, I think, a wake-up call now that we need to make sure, where is our infrastructure? Where are our hospitals doing?
Yeah.
Where are we without US?
What are our politicians arguing in the House of Commons or on, at Queen's Park? What's the level of conversation they're debating? Now we want to know about, hello, what is when they do their budget, what's the percentage, what's the dollar value going into infrastructure, what's the dollar value going into security, what's the dollar value going, we want to know all these things. No longer are we going to say, we're going to take down statues because that guy in 200 years ago was a racist. Okay, yeah, he was a racist. We're not racist, but that's the history. Right, we're taking down Remember those arguments? We had to change the name of this university. We had to change the name of that school, that community center. We had to take down this statue. Okay, but like now we want to just be working Canadians with purchase power, and I don't care about the statue because that's our history. Okay, because it's our history, we learn from it. Because it was our history, we said I'm sorry, and we learned from it, and we move on. But do we need to have a debate? No. There's no time. You got to go to work. You don't have time to debate this.
Now we're talking about productivity. Now we're talking about per capita GDP. Now we're realizing we're a G7 nation. But are we going to stay a G7 nation? We are poorer than our American cousins. We are poorer than our Australian cousins.
Yes.
So per capita GDP, where are we? Our quality of life. Our quality of life is deteriorating. And US says, thanks, but no thanks. We're not going to bail out you anymore. You need to spend on your own defense. I mean, I'm thinking of a time, say for instance, 10, 15, 20 years from now, if China, the way it's progressing, Chinese, naval, the way it's progressing, the way they're progressing in Air Force, China, if they start telling, 10 years ago, when our DeepSeek challenged artificial intelligence in the US, were you sleeping at that time? This was 2025 when China's DeepSeek challenged that. Now, sir, this is 2035. We are not Donald Trump. Donald Trump may be threatened it will annex you, but China would say, no, we're not Donald Trump. This is 2035, this is 2040. You better take care of yourself, or tomorrow Russia or China or any other country, they could say, fine, this is our area.
Yeah, I mean, now we're talking about having, our military out in Northwest Territories.
Yeah.
None of it, because we're seeing the threat of, North Pole is melting. It's a line from Russia. We're seeing the threat. We weren't talking about any of those things. We were like, oh no, we don't invest in our military. Oh no, we don't do any of these things. Yeah. What happened? So
for Canada, we're listening Canada first from the Conservatives. We're listening Canada strong from the Liberals. But I think we need Canada first. We need Canada strong. We need Canada free. We need a sovereign Canada which is strong and free. And we can only remain strong if we focus on being sovereign, if we focus on being, we could be strong, but if you're not sovereign, if you're dependent on anybody else, we can't be strong. So first of all, this is a good wake-up call, you're right.
And also when it comes to education, then perhaps we're going to have degrees that educate people for jobs that exist, right? So no longer am I going to graduate with film studies. Right? What am I going to do with film studies degree?
Become an actor, producer, director.
Sure, yeah, because Canada is actually a good hub for for that, because it actually subsidizes Hollywood when they come to shoot here. Yeah. But it's been a while since I've been at university, but there are certain degrees that you graduate from, and then you're like, where's the job, right? Art history, for example. Yeah. Right? It's great because you're so knowledgeable and so worldly in terms of that. But then there's also the universities are a business, and they need to create and colleges to have jobs that are going to be competitive. Whether it's in manufacturing, whether it's in AI, whether it's in this, that, security. Now it's about how do we make sure because Germany does that very well. They train people for jobs. Right, their unemployment rate is not ever, that high, and that's because from high school, what they do is they test people, and then from that they streamline them to university or college, and in the trades or a profession. And I'm not saying we need to do that, but we also need to think about do we have an educated workforce for the economy of today and tomorrow?
Yeah, but one of the challenges that Germany also is facing, because they're invested a lot, which has worked well for them, from BMW to Mercedes to many German cars that they manufacture, which is great, but they focused a lot on the manufacturing sector. But of course, they also need to focus on the new forefronts of economy, which is technology as well. So Germany needs to do that also. But anyways, you're right. I mean, Germany still has a decent standard of living. Finland, Sweden, all these Scandinavian countries, you know,
and Germany pays like almost 50% in taxes. Like their social welfare is very strong, and they still have a decent level of standard of living. Absolutely.
Yeah. Wish we had more time, but always a pleasure talking to you, Monaji. We discussed Y Media Political Sensex. We discussed Y Media Foreign Policy. Thank you.
Yeah, and you know, and I apologize if I sounded insensitive at any point of this conversation. It was just really coming down to, you know, what does this mean, and what's the opportunity that we can look at? I obviously understand that this is a very hard time, and a lot of Canadians are going through a very hard time, and you know, it's just the reality of things, but we always have to look at, you know, why, as this is happening, okay, if we can't figure out the purpose, what are the potential consequences, and having a conversation just about negative consequences isn't going to be very well for our morale. So what are the positive consequences of this? What can we do in this crisis? What is the opportunity, and how can I rise to the occasion? Of course, I'm looking at who's going to run for prime minister, and are they rising to the occasion, and the cabinet ministers, but really, how am I going to rise to the occasion? What am I going to do when it comes to my household? How am I going to budget? Am I going to have side jobs? Am I going to now, you know, educate myself in something that I've been thinking about doing, but now I take the time and do it, so then I prepare myself better for the economy that's now. What am I going to do with my children when it comes to their education, and you know, in turn? So all of this is at play, and I think we're rebuilding. You know, when they say wartime and you rebuild a country after wartime, when it comes to housing and economy and everything else, we're in a wartime, and this is where the rebuilding starts.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, you're right. I mean, we didn't mean to be insensitive, or we do realize there are job losses here. There are more really challenges. But obviously, you know, we need to look at the future as well. What do we plan for 6 months from now, 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years from now? That's the vision we need to have for now. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion. That's all the time that we have here at Y Media Newsroom, Y Media Political Sensex, Y Media Foreign Policy, and of course, Y Media Business and Wealth Report. Thank you.
Hi, this is Priyanka Chopra and you're watching Channel Y.
The biggest South Asian media group, Y Media.